Everything, everything gonna be all right this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of It's Me Speaking to You. I am, as always, your ever-faithful host, Mr. Jeffrey Wilson, coming to you live and direct from the gateway to the West, St. Louis, Missouri. And, folks, I have a surprise guest for you. It's even a surprise guest for me. I called him up to try to maybe set something up, and he said, let's do it now. And I like that. I like that. No better time than the present, and all I got to say is, ho! And that should tell you one indication right there of who we have on the show. I'm such a fan of this gentleman. I'm a huge fan. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program, Mr. Hacksaw, Jim Duggan. What's up, buddy?
Well, thank you, brother. That was a pretty good hole, and I got to give one myself to get going. Ho! Kind of wakes me up in the morning, gets me ready to go.
Gets that blood pumping. Man, I thank you so much for taking the time, honestly. I spoke with a mutual friend a couple days ago about getting you on. He said to give you a call, so I did that, and man, you were like, "Hey, let's rock and roll right now," and I wasn't quite prepared for it, but let's do it. Let's do it.
Well, way to adapt, brother. That's a lot
Absolutely.
Big part of wrestling, on the fly. And yeah, I'm sitting here taking care. Just got done doing another interview, so it works out great.
We're gonna call it in the ring, as they say. We're gonna call it in the ring.
There you go, brother. You know the terminology.
Yeah, buddy. So if you don't mind, man, I obviously don't want to keep you too incredibly long, and I know I don't want you to have to repeat things you've said hundreds of times, but inform my audience. Obviously, we all know who you are, but how did you get your start into this business we know as professional wrestling?
Well, it's different than a lot of guys because I wasn't a big wrestling fan growing up. My whole goal was to become a pro football player, and I'm originally from upstate New York, and I had a pretty good high school career where actually my shot put record still stands today.
Check you out.
I put a bunch of wimps up there. And of course, I won the state wrestling championship my senior year, but football was my main sport. So I was lucky enough to be highly recruited, but I played my college ball for Southern Methodist University down in Dallas, Texas, right, the Mustangs. And on a freak accident, I met Fritz von Erich, and he opened up the door to wrestling for me.
Oh, wow. So was that your first territory down there in the world class?
Yeah, I broke in. Yeah, I came down. Gary Hart gave me my first pair of trunks in 1979. I still have the program where newcomer Duggan makes his debut.
What was the name?
And I was Big Jim Duggan.
Okay.
Pretty catchy.
Yeah. It's definitely appropriate. But
Gino Hernandez kind of took me under his wing and showed me a lot. I left there and I was up visiting my dad up in Glens Falls, New York, and he knew Arnie Skoll, and he's like, well, hey, my kid wrestles. And Arnie's like, well, bring him down to the Glens Falls Civic Center. So I went down there. I wrestled a guy named Moose Morawski. And, I was a relatively big kid in that time of in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. So they put me to TV, and I worked with Sergeant Slaughter, Angelo Mosca, Ken Patera. This Big Jim Duggan, yeah.
Throwing out them names there, folks. Throwing out some serious names there.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then that's what they called me in, I was Big Jim. I had short hair, clean shaven. I wore a long gold bathrobe to the ring. I knew very, very little about wrestling. And so Vince McMahon Sr. and Arnie Skoll called me in the office, and they're like, kid, you might have a future, but come up with something better than Big Jim and get rid of that gold bathrobe.
Well, the Big Jim stuck. Well, you guys switched to Hacksaw, but yeah.
Well, no, actually, they said, we're going to send you out to learn the business. And I'm like, well, I'm thinking, well, where the hell are you going to send me? And they're like, well, we're going to send you to Hawaii. I'm like, you got to be kidding. They sent me out to Hawaii where I worked for Peter Maivia. And that's the Rock's granddad. I worked with Rock's granddad and his dad. Never had an opportunity to work with The Rock. But anyway, out there I was the convict. I wore a mask with C's on it, I put C's on it for the convict, which I thought was pretty clever. And the fans are like, why'd you put those ears on your mask? I said, they're not ears, they're C's for the convict. So that didn't work, and I came back to WWF, and I went back to Big Jim Duggan.
So what year would this have been?
It was probably like 81, 82.
Okay. So there's still WWF at the time.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that the three W's there before Vince took over. Vince was still the ring announcer, TV announcer.
Yeah.
Him and Jesse. And I went to Georgia Championship Wrestling with Gordon Soley, and was down there. Got one of my best friends in my life, Terry Gordy, the Fabulous Freebirds. God bless him.
God bless him.
Yeah, and had a run down there as Big Jim Duggan with like Charlie Cook. I worked with DiBiase, him and Tommy Rich. I worked with Ted for the first time. And he always tells the story how I didn't really know what I was doing. I was extremely stiff. And, of course, Ted cleaned it up a lot from the original, but he cussed me out pretty good in the ring. And then I went from there actually to Pensacola, where I was working for the Fullers. And I went as Wild Man Duggan. I grew my fur, I grew my beard real heavy, and I wore fur with chains on it. And that really didn't work. But I got my break. I went to San Antonio with Joe Blanchard's territory, worked with Bruiser Brody, and the Hacksaw character came around.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because I was going to say, the image you described there with the leather and the fur with the big beard, that kind of sounds a little Brody-esque a bit. So, yeah, you guys actually did have some matches then.
Yeah, Brody was a big influence on my career. Actually, he's the guy that kind of talked me into the 2x4. You know, I was.
Really?
But I was having a good little run in with the Fullers down there. I was living on Panama City Beach. I had a hot little stripper for a girlfriend. You know, we were living with Luke the Bushwhacker and Joe LeDuc. I was having a good time, and Buck Robley called me and says, "Hey, we need somebody in San Antonio to work with Brody." And I'm like, "Well, things are going awful good here, Buck." So the next day, Brody called me and said, "Hey, get your ass out here, learn how to wrestle."
Oh, yeah. Brody's a decent, I mean, I don't know about you, how established you were, but I guess working with Brody, I would think, would be a decent payday.
Oh, it was, of course. It was the first show was at the Sam Houston Coliseum with Paul Bosch, you know. I came in as a main event to work with Brody. You know, I still was, though I've been around a little bit, I was relatively green, to say the least. And Paul Bosch gave me my envelope, and I went into the bathroom, and I opened it with $1,000. I'm like, wow! I said, talk about setting the hook. I went and got my U-Haul and moved from Pensacola to San Antonio.
Didn't need much more convincing after that.
Well, back then, you know, it was a liberating time. You know, you throw everything you own in a suitcase, throw it in your car, and say, "See you later."
Right.
No responsibilities, you know. It was a fun time in the business.
Rejoice, O men, in thy youth. So that's interesting. You brought up something with Vince or whoever had said, you know, taking you to Hawaii, sending you on the road. It's so different now. Obviously, you know, what are your opinions on obviously the product today, and obviously it's so different, and the removal, if you will, of that territory system, which was, you know, obviously so huge back in the day, but also so huge as it related to kids coming up learning. They actually had somewhere to go. If you didn't like Georgia, you could go to Vern, you could go to the Fullers, or you could go to Texas. I mean, now it's obviously so different, and there is no on-the-road learning, if you will. Tell me a little bit about how the removal of that has changed the business today and the product today.
Of course, you know, with the Performance Center, you got everybody down in Orlando learning from the same guys, learning the same technique, you know, learning how to work the same way.
Right.
But like you said, with the territory system, guys would rotate around the territories and learn to work different ways. And, of course, that was better for the talent, because not only would you learn your ring work, but guys like Bill Watts, if you didn't do your interview right, you would do another interview, and you learned your mic skills.
Right.
And you wouldn't do one generic interview. You'd do one for Shreveport, one for Monroe, one for Baton Rouge. You would do one for every individual city.
Wow.
And, so you'd learn not only your ring work, but your mic skills. And, of course, that would happen in every territory. And, of course, guys miss that. That's something they miss. But as everything, the business has evolved. It went from an arena business that focused their main business around the arena shows to a television business, and they do most of their business by the television. So the business has changed, and I know a lot of people are critical of today's product, And I'm like, well, there'll be 100,000 people at WrestleMania.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely working. Well, I mean, obviously, it's such a different generation now. Like like I said, I'm 42, so like the wrestling I grew up watching, there's almost like no semblance of it anymore. So these new generations really have no. I mean, I guess through the network they have some understanding in YouTube, but it's really pretty much the kids who watch it now. They grew up on WWE.
Yeah, there's a whole reassurance of with the network, it opened up the golden age. My generation of guys that I'm just lucky enough to be part of.
Yeah.
Hogan, Macho, Junkyard Dog, Jake the Snake, Ted DiBiase, Coco Beware. It was like Hollywood with Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne. It was just kind of the golden age of professional wrestling. And thank goodness folks still remember it.
Yeah, thank goodness for YouTube and for like the network, because man, it's just like I said, I don't really knock the product too much, the stuff now. I mean, I go see it because it's entertaining, and my daughter, she's young and she loves it, but this is just, especially even going back and remembering those storylines, like you and DiBiase and I think it was the Cadillac or something like that. Where, I mean, it was just, there's just so much.
Yeah. I mean, one of the storyline. Of course, now you got Hollywood writers writing the storylines and writing the verbiage for your interview. I mean, how can last time I did a WWE show, I went in and this young guy comes up and goes, "Mr. Duggan, here's your verbiage for your interview." I said, "How's some punk kid going to tell Hacksaw Jim Duggan how to cut his interview?" And they're like, "Well, this is what we want you to say." And I'm like, "Well, send me my check."
Yeah.
But I have a whole new respect for those guys that deliver lines that natural. I mean, that's a very whole different set of skills that I think a lot of guys in the WWF days didn't have.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you guys, it was off the dome. You guys were that was part of, like you said, what you guys had learned in those territories is learning your mic skills. So you didn't need anybody, and quite frankly, you guys, I mean, like I said, a lot of people are going to go to WrestleMania. It still works, but you guys basically talked people into arenas, night after night after night with those awesome promos. I mean, that was such a huge component of, I think, like you said, the golden age was, man, a lot of you guys' mic skills.
Yeah, it's and that's what I tell folks, about pro wrestling. People are, "Well, you guys are all good friends, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, we all compete for the same money. We're real good friends,
Yeah.
And I see a lot of young guys that do a lot of Comic-Cons, a lot of different types of conventions. Of course, I do my show, and I have these young guys go up and say, "Actually, I want to be a WWE wrestler." I said, "Well, that's great, because chase your dreams, because who would have ever thought Daniel Bryan would become a huge star?"
Exactly.
There's a guy that had the heart, the desire, the work ethic. He made himself a star. So, chase your dreams. But remember, there's 1,500 NFL football players playing this year.
Right.
There's 1,000 NBA basketball players. There's maybe, 120 guys on the WWE roster.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a better chance of playing in the NBA than you do make it in the WWE.
Yeah.
And it's not just kids from this country. You got guys coming from Australia,
Everywhere.
Japan, Europe, everywhere.
You notice, too, the careers, I mean, you don't see, I mean, you've been wrestling forever. I mean, obviously, you guys are pretty much retired from acting.
Is that a shot, brother?
No, I'm just saying.
Not
at all, sir. I'm just saying you guys had a very long career. You guys had very lengthy careers, even with, the road schedule, and you guys still took the bumps and everything. But today's wrestler, it seems like, I don't know if it's because of the nature of the business and they're concentrating on high spots more so than like the psychology of it. The careers just aren't quite as long. Why do you think that is?
There's a high injury problem nowadays, because the kids are pushing the envelope every night, every show, man. Those guys are doing these high-risk maneuvers that are, you mess up or somebody else messes up, people are going to get hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, guys did that before, Macho and a lot of guys, Snuka and people like that would do the high-flying stuff. They picked their show. They wouldn't be doing it in Scranton, but they do it at the Garden,
Right.
But these guys nowadays are doing it every night. And so, injuries are a problem. Plus, also, like in other professional sports, the money's much better, so you probably don't have to work as long as we did in the day.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, and I find it interesting to compare the two, because it's just, I don't know, still a great business, but obviously, like you said, it's evolved, and it's quite vastly different now. If you don't mind, and it's kind of a sensitive subject or a touchy subject, and you don't have to speak on it if you don't want to, I saw the Shiek documentary not too long ago, and I remember as a kid reading in the newspaper the incident when you and Shiek kind of had a mishap on the road. I forget where it was at, somewhere maybe northeast, I forget. If you don't mind, how did that come about? I think it was like somebody missed a ride, or you guys kind of had. But it was kind of a no-no because you guys were in an angle at the time. Tell me about how that whole thing went down.
Right, yeah, I was right after WrestleMania 3. Of course, it's the most popular arrest in wrestling.
Yeah.
Benoit butchers his family. People talk about Duggan Shiek. But anyway, I saw Shiek at the Newark airport, and he didn't have a ride, and so I gave the guy a ride. And what the worst thing about it, people think we're close. We weren't close, but I did give the guy a ride. And
right.
He said, maybe we get some St. Pauli Girl beer. And I'm never, ever drink another St. Pauli Girl beer, I'll tell you that, brother. But anyway, he stopped and got some St. Pauli Girl beer, and I had a little weed ski in my pocket. Oh. Well, actually, I had it under the seat. And anyway, so we were drinking the beer on I think it was Garden State Parkway, and I was living in Louisiana that has drive-through daiquiri huts, and so I thought nothing of it. The trooper pulled me over and says, "You're drinking and driving." I said, "Well, I'm not drunk." I said, "I'm just sipping on a beer." He said, "That's illegal in New Jersey."
I'm just sipping on a beer.
Yeah, I mean, this was in the 80s, brother.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
So,
exactly.
Like I said, they have drive-through daiquiri huts down in Louisiana. Like no big deal, and so boom, he says, "I smell marijuana." Again, it's in the 80s. I'm out of Louisiana. I said, "Yes, sir. I've got a small amount of marijuana under my seat." He's like, "You're under arrest."
Oh.
I'm like,
Did they know
wait,
who you were at that point yet? Did they know who you guys were?
Yeah, I think that pretty well. The one trooper right off the bat.
Oh, okay.
And of course, boom, they call the big backup and everything. So they pulled the Shiek out of the car, and they searched the Shiek. And long story short, the Shiek had 3 grams of cocaine in different containers. I had less than a half ounce of marijuana under the car. So I got a ticket for drinking while driving and a summons for misdemeanor marijuana. Shiek had a felony cocaine arrest. But, of course, the New York Daily News, it wasn't the front page, but it was the back page. It had a big picture of me and a big picture of the Shiek. The headlines were, "Boozing Bozos."
Oh, no.
And, they had marijuana, beer, cocaine down the parkway. I mean, it was brutal. That was, long before the Internet.
Yo, imagine, geez, that would have been, obviously it was still bad then. Just hearing, like, Shiek's version of it or whatever, but just, if you can, like, 1 to 10, I don't even think I'd say I'd probably past 10. How pissed was Vince at you guys?
Oh, yeah, it was extreme, obviously. My call was to my dad, God bless him, who was my best man in my wedding, and my best friend. He was still chief of police in Glens Falls, New York, so I called him, and, he got ambushed by the cameras, too, because I didn't think nobody, I was naive. I'm like, I don't think nobody will know.
I think I remember him saying that in the video, like, you guys like, wait, maybe nothing will happen. Maybe no one will find out.
We're on the side of the road. Nobody saw us. What the hell, But of course, my dad was like, "Did you get arrested for cocaine?" And I said, "No, sir." And I got arrested for pot. And he chewed my ass a little bit, but then my whole family really rallied behind me because I tell you, it was actually from the penthouse to the shit house, and one huge mistake hamstring my career to a point where I never got the heavy duty push after that. Never was world champion, never was tag team champion, never was intercontinental champion.
Yeah,
I was actually very, very lucky to survive the whole ordeal professionally.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, it definitely was a fork in the road, and it seemed just watching your career, like especially coming on. You were still hot, but you were really hot with the. After WrestleMania 3 and just that whole match. So it's like, it was interesting to see, and I really felt bad for you guys, quite frankly, because you guys are professional wrestlers, and, it did change the course of your careers really significantly, and I just...
It was all over 21, and you had nobody to blame but ourselves, and it was a bad mistake.
But it's really
not the worst thing
tale.
that's ever happened to me, actually. So, they got to keep everything in perspective.
No, absolutely. But it is a good, I think, cautionary tale with kids. Like one mistake can really change the course of things. I mean, it's definitely
Certainly did, yeah. Professionally, like I said, I don't think I've ever really recovered. They always kept me strong, but never got the big rocket.
Right. Well, like I said, we all love you, brother, and we all, you're definitely a legend.
Oh, it's been a good career for me. That's actually a good segue, brother. Thanks very much into actually the Hacksaw Jim Duggan show, which you can see at hacksawshow.com for information.
Hacksaw's
and my book,
on the road,
Jim Duggan's Story, another catchy title. But it's been a positive business for me, so I put a positive spin on things. I've been my wife for 30 years. I've never had to go to rehab for cocaine or booze or any drugs. No booze or drugs. No felony arrest. A couple misdemeanors, but it was the 80s,
Yeah, come on now. Yeah, I was going to say. It's the 80s.
And I raised 2 daughters. It's been a good business for me. So I tell folks, we're not all Scott Hall. We're not like my good friend Jake the Snake Roberts, who's struggling with all kinds of drugs, and not all like my 3 best friends, Gino Hernandez, Terry Gordy, and Dr. Death Steve Williams, who were all gone.
Terry, obviously Gino was 20. They all were young, but Terry was like 40, 41. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and Doc, when people try to compare us to sports teams, I said, especially back in the day, we were more like a rock and roll band.
Oh, yeah.
You're flying into Paris, into London, down at the Stringfellows in downtown London, partying with Michael Douglas and Grace Jones.
Yeah.
It was a lifestyle. It wasn't a job.
Yeah, you got me. I like I said, I'm a huge mark for it. I love the old, like the Four Horsemen videos, like the old Starcades. I just love going down memory lane like that because I have such a different perspective of it now as like a grown adult. And I see it more as the business as opposed to before when everyone believed. I just really have like the business, and you guys were rock stars, man. It was really cool to watch it, especially as a kid. But like I said, that does segue us into your next phase, if you will. Mr. Hacksaw Jim Duggan is going on the road with a bit of a comedy tour, if you will. A little some chuckles. What prompted this, and where can we find you?
Yeah, it's called the 2x4 tour, and it's the hacksawshow.com. And actually, I tip my hat to Mick Foley, who opened this door for a lot of us guys.
Mm-hmm.
I've done them over in England and Scotland, up in Canada. Jake the Snake and I did one over in Nashville at Zany's in Nashville.
Nice.
And it's not really comedy as, standing up and telling joke after joke. Yeah, it's ring stories, stories about Andre, stories about Ultimate Warrior, road stories, travel with Jake the Snake Roberts and Damien, rib stories about Owen Hart and, God bless him, and many other guys. And it's also a chance for folks to interact and, ask questions and get some answers. And even if people aren't wrestling fans, like folks are always intrigued about our business. I'll be on a plane next to a businessman. He go, you're a wrestler? I'm not really a wrestling fan, but how about...
Yeah.
Which is great,
Well, and it's cool nowadays, especially with the internet, like even kind of before the podcast became hugely popular, I would listen to so many of those shoot interviews because you guys have so many stories, 25 plus years, if not 30 years of wrestling stories, of road stories with individuals, like you said, just who's who list of, you can name it. Just go down the list and it would be, you could probably spend 2 stories telling Andre stories or 2 hours telling Sheik stories or 2 hours, so I think it's awesome. And I can't wait to see all of that come to fruition, man, because like I said, you could have a lot of people sitting on the edge of their seat with some of them stories.
This one, it's going to be early February, all through upstate New York and into Massachusetts. So it'll be fun, and I enjoyed being with the people. And there's so many wrestling fans out there. Just this past weekend, I was in Oklahoma with Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler, and
nice.
They had a huge independent show out there with like 2,000 people jammed in the arena. This weekend, I'm down in Miami with Goldberg and Nash for that big Legends of Wrestling show. So folks are hungry for a number 2. TNA is just not filling the bill. There's a chance out there for one of these other companies to bump TNA, because for every Hertz, there's an Avis.
Absolutely.
You're not going to compete with Vince.
No.
But I tell you, there's room for somebody to bump TNA.
Yeah. Like I said, they're not going to compete with Vince, but another option, I hate to call it competition, that's absolutely
just another alternative for folks to watch, yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, buddy. Is there any other social networking stuff you want to shout out there?
Sure,
for your show, for you?
Yeah, God bless Roddy Piper, my buddy there. He's the one that got me going. I would joke. I said, I'm at 100,000 people on Twitter, Pipe. He goes, Duggan, I got 500,000. I'm so like, oh, okay.
Well, one of my first episodes. One of my first episodes was with the gentleman who was co-hosting Piper's Pit with him, a stand-up comedian by the name of Earl Skakel. I had him on one of my first episodes, and that was really cool. I mean, obviously he was hanging with Roddy right into the end there, so that was a really cool conversation. And yeah, he was one of the other ones that got the podcast going.
Yeah, we became very close over the Legend House 5 weeks. We were roommates together, but
that's right.
He's the one that got me going on social media. So the Twitter is official Hacksaw, @official Hacksaw, and the Facebook is Hacksaw Jim Duggan. The book is Hacksaw the Jim Duggan Story. The 2x4 tour is Hacksaw Jim Duggan Show. And I'm Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
And he's Hacksaw Jim Duggan, man. I thank you so very much for taking this time. Take care of yourself, my friend.